Guthrie, and I introduced him and some of his basic ideas. So just to recap quickly, you remember he's the consummate contiguity theorist because his theory doesn't really involve reinforcement or punishment or any notions like that. He does talk about them, but they're certainly not a featured component of his theory. His theory really involves, and by the way, his theory also involves voluntary responses, not emitted or elicited involuntary kinds of responses, reflexes. They involve voluntary kinds of responses. So there's a stimulus, there's your voluntary response, and you remember what you need to know for the test is that what's important here is his recency principle. That response that you emitted most recently in any given situation is what you're going to do the next time that stimulus is there. It's just that simple. Oh yeah, you mean when you reward it? No, forget that. Just whatever you did last time you were in the presence of that stimulus, that's the response you're going to make. You also remember that he makes a distinction between movements, acts, and skills. Movements being little muscular twitches. And he said that learning takes place at full strength on one trial. So it's not gradual, like with Pavlov. It takes place at full strength on one trial. But what takes place is a connection between a movement and a stimulus, not a skill. A skill involves lots of movements, and a skill is made up of an act. Acts are made up of movements, and so on. So larger units. So as I said last time, you don't learn to play a piano sitting down once at the piano. It's a buildup of lots of connections there. But those very small muscular movements, those connections, those things get connected to stimuli on one trial. And his recency principle. But what keeps a whole series of movements connected together that make up an act? You recall another concept that's important for him in your book there is movement-produced stimuli. Movement-produced stimuli are very important for him because that's what kind of connects the whole thing together, a series of responses. That is, stimuli that are the result of movement. Remember we did a little demonstration where someone came up here and I had them hold out their arm? Remember we had talked about how there are sense receptor cells embedded in the muscles and the tendons and the joints in your body, which send signals to your brain. And it's all of those little stimuli that get connected together that result in a series of movements being connected together, which results in like a behavioral chain. So that's an important concept for him. All right, so one trial learning, movement-produced stimuli, and that is, proprioceptive stimulation, internal proprioceptive stimulation. Now, you should be familiar with the Guthrie-Horton experiment. Remember I said he conducted exactly one experiment with Horton, and that's the one with the cats. And what you can take away from that, and what he discovered was that each organism develops its own idiosyncratic way of responding in any given situation. Why is that? Well, because every organism makes a different response in different situations. We all don't walk together arm in arm and make the same movements. We all make different movements. Those are the ones that get connected together. And but with regard to reinforcement and punishment, both. He does talk about them, but where they come into play is that, is it possible that a stimulus will follow this response? Absolutely. What if it happens to be what you'd call a reinforcer or a punisher? Well, it's just a stimulus. It could be food, it could be electric shock, whatever. But whatever stimulus follows this response, it preserves the learning that just took place here. Why is that? Because this situation here is this stimulus, which may contain some of these stimuli, but like if there's a reinforcer or a punisher in here, it changes the stimulus situation. And because it changes the stimulus situation, it preserves this connection at this point. So that's how punishment and reinforcement affect. It has nothing to do with the hedonic value of this thing. It has to do with it, with a reinforcer or a punisher. Oh, it's a different situation now. Oh, so this response connection is preserved. Now there's another response that follows that. And so, okay, that gets connected. And so on and so forth. Could be movement-produced introduce stimuli, it could be a reinforcer, whatever, but these things preserve, because it changes here, preserves this connection. All right. Now, sometimes punishers, like a shock or being hit or something like that, may actually lead you to do make a certain kind of response. And he says punishment may play a role like that. It may affect your behavior because of what it makes you do. The example they use in the book is that if you've got a dog that's chasing cars and you want to get it to stop chasing cars, well, every time a car comes by, what does that dog do? Chases the cars. I know, I'll spank it. I'll hit it on the rear end, with a rolled up newspaper. Every time a car comes by, I'm going to hit it on the rear end to get it to stop doing that. But all it's going to do is make the dog run faster after the car. Because when you hit the dog, that caused the dog to run faster, to lunge faster. So the next time the car comes, he's just going to be going even faster. Well, how can we change a stimulus situation to cause the dog to make a different kind of response here? Well, when the dog jumps toward the car, hit him in the face, knock him back. Okay, well, the last thing he did when the car was there was he went back like that. Well, that's, according to Guthrie, that's what he's going to do the next time. Hit him on the rear end, he's going to chase the car faster. Hit him in the face, cause him to fall back. I don't know. I'm just imagining putting up some big window there. He goes for the car, wham, Okay, well, what's it going to do next time the car's there, That just brought to mind birds. Sometimes in our house we have these big picture windows on the back of the house. Got a lot of birds and very tropical backyard. And these birds are constantly hitting the window, just wham. And I'm thinking, well, it seems like it doesn't take them very many trials to figure that one out. It's like they see a window. I don't think they're going to be flying into it again. The last thing they did when they were coming at this window was like, well, sometimes they go unconscious. But, so I don't know how much learning has taken place. But I'm not sure if they're actually unconscious, because I think one of their survival strategies is to play dead. They do that. They get hit, or, sometimes what they do is they just flop over. And you think, oh my God, the poor bird is dead. And then you watch them for a while. And after they've been laying there for a while, all of a sudden they just get right up and start going. And I think what it is maybe predators don't want a dead bird. So if I just lay there and look dead, they won't want to eat me, But anyway, that's the role that reinforcement and punishment plays, is that it's what it causes the organism to do. And he also talked about maintaining stimuli, that there are certain stimuli, like when you're hungry, your stomach growling, that stimulus is there and gets connected to all these responses and keeps you going. Until what? Your hunger goes away. And then the stimulus situation has changed, and then you're not looking for food anymore. Everything has to do with what it makes you do, what response you did last time, and it's all tied in with that, this recency principle. Now, you can say, well, I only did one experiment. There's not a lot of research to back this up. This is true. But all I know is you keep looking around in the world and you see an awful lot of examples of behavior and procedures that are based on Guthrie's ideas. Fire drills, firemen. You're training to be a fire person, let's say. What do they have them do? Sit around and read books on how to put out fires? Hopefully not. They take them out. They have a tower out here, at least they used to have one east of Edinburgh, where they build fires and then they have them put them out. Because the next time there's a fire there, I want some guy looking for his book, his textbook. Wait a minute, what am I supposed to do there? Same thing with CPR. Anybody in here ever take CPR? Yeah. What do they have you do? Sitting there just reading a book on CPR? No. What do? Yeah, they have those dummies that you sit there and practice on, Well, I know, let's see, in the book here it says you're supposed to put your hands together or something and then press and, and by the way, don't hit the sternum. What's that? I don't even know what that is. Okay, so these dummies, they have these bodies with the legs cut off and stuff. It looks, but anyway, you sit there and you practice it. Because the next time that somebody is there, you just go into action and you do your thing. You're not going to sit there and be reading about, let's see, how do I fold my hands again? But what always what always, because I went through that training several times, and I can never remember, let's see, how many times are you supposed to pump now? Because it changes. How many times you're supposed to do that and then breathe how many times? I don't remember. It's been a while.
30.
Huh? 30 which? Breathing or pumping? And what about the breathing part? Because it seems like 30, man, 2 minutes, no oxygen, that's going to be...
But it pushes the oxygen to the body.
No, but if they're not breathing, what's that?
2 breaths.
Every 30 pumps, 2 breaths? Is that what? Because it didn't used to be. It was more like a dozen or something and a couple of breaths in between. But you want somebody who knows that. Now I've probably confused you all. You're going to be going, oh, no, what was it? What is that what you were saying? But the fact is, you got to go through the motions. I was talking about in your house. If fire breaks out on the stove, if you haven't gone through some sort of a little drill, you're going to be running around. That's on fire. Fire drills, teaching people to be a fire person. I think I mentioned if you're going to be giving a speech, what do you want to do? Sit at home, looking in the mirror at home, rehearsing your speech? I wouldn't recommend that. Because when you come up to give your speech in speech class, you're not going to be looking at your mirror. You're going to be looking at a classroom full of people, and you're going to go, if that's what you did last time you gave a speech. We have students sometimes that are going to present papers at conferences in psychology. Maybe they present it to Psych-Hi or some group before they go up there, so they don't do that when they get in a room full of other faculty and professors and students, so they're not sitting there. Well, one way to get around that, I guess, is you just read a paper. I hate it when I go to conferences and some professor stands there and just starts reading a manuscript. It's like, I can read. Just give me a copy of it. If that's all you're going to do, just leave a copy at the door. I don't need to sit there and watch you read me bedtime stories. I don't like it when people do that. Just talk to me. But sometimes that's the way people do it. But you got to rehearse it. What about? I'll tell you. Here's another example of Guthrie. I think when I was a kid, I don't know why I had trouble tying shoes. That was like a real stumbling block for me. And they give you this like fake, little wooden boot with shoelaces, and you're supposed to tie them. But I always thought, this is a stupid way to do this. Even when I was a kid, I thought, because I'm not looking at my shoe from the front. I guess it doesn't really matter. But at that age, you don't know. It's like I have to see it. I can't just looking at this thing from the front. What am I supposed to do? I'm not looking at a boot that way. I don't know. You could probably think of lots of examples. Yes, you can think of lots of examples. How about taking tests? Taking tests like the GRE or the GMAT or the, any of those professional tests to go to, or ACT, SAT. What do you generally do before you take those if you got your act together? You just walk in there cold, my brilliance will carry the day. Hopefully not. Hopefully what you're going to do is take some practice tests. What's the point of that? To get used to seeing those kind of items and responding that way. And by the way, a lot of those practice tests, they're timed. Well, yeah, because the actual test is timed. Well, of course, with the GRE, I remember when I took it, I distinctly remember it was a very unpleasant experience. And when I got near the end, I didn't care. At that point, I didn't care if I went to graduate school. It's just like, where's the end of this thing? I'm done. I don't want to see any more questions. It was a horrible experience. I did some practice tests before I took the real test, but they were practice tests. They were printed practice tests, and they were timed. But guess what? They weren't indicative of the actual test, as far as I could tell. I took the practice test. No problem. I could do this. Going to the actual test, and I'm going, this looks nothing like those practice tests. It did. They say, though, that it helps, if no other reason than just to get you looking at those kind of items and just responding with a time frame, time limit, and all that. So I think they are useful, and that sure sounds like Guthrie to me. I think you see lots of examples of Guthrie out there. So anyhow, may not have a lot of direct empirical support, but honestly, I think that this area, this is probably really open for a lot of empirical research to test out Guthrie's ideas, I think you could come up with a lot of experiments where you could try this. But I've never actually seen a lot of things that test his idea. Everybody goes, oh yeah, the one experiment, and that's it, and that's the end of that. Anyhow, how to break habits. Let's talk about that. By the way, he calls these things habits, and there's ways of breaking them. There's the threshold method you need to know about on page 202, the fatigue method and the incompatible response. Let's talk about them. Well, you already know the threshold method by another name. What's that other name? Guthrie's threshold method, if you've read this section. Now, I'm making a big leap of faith here, which I shouldn't make, because I know that the test, let's see, it's next Monday. That means you'll be starting to read all these chapters like Wednesday. So, okay. Well, anyway, the threshold method is just like systematic desensitization. It's very much like, it's not exactly like, because it doesn't involve relaxation and all that. But it's like systematic desensitization in that what you do is you introduce the organism to some new situation at a level so low that the undesirable behavior never does get emitted and gets replaced by some other behavior. And that's like systematic desensitization. The threshold method. Introduce new stimuli at such a low level that you don't get the undesirable behavior. The example they use in your book is the breaking a horse. Breaking a horse. Well, so a few years back, there was this guy in Florida named the Horse Whisperer. They even made a movie about it. He came out with this videotape, and my wife and her side of our family they're big horse people and this and that. And of course, I used to listen to my father-in-law, big old horse guy from San Antonio, going way back, right? So I figured, well, he knows everything there is to know about horses and cows and stuff. So we bought this horse, I think I told you. And then I went out and, you know, in this process of buying a horse, buying land, buying a tractor, building a barn, you know, it's like, well, the budget can only handle so much. So I went out to find a trailer, horse trailer. And I found a real good price on one, but it was this old style trailer for thoroughbreds, which I don't know if you probably don't even know what I'm talking about, but they're inline. They call them inline trailers. They're very low and they're very narrow, and you can put two horses back to back in them. And they have the front wheels turn like a wagon. Now, it's a very slick little trailer, except that you can't back them up because the wheels turn in the front. So every time you go to back up the trailer, the wheels go like that. So you can only go one direction with this trailer. You know, and anyway, they were very popular back in the 1960s at racetracks. So I got this trailer. So we're trying to get this new horse into the trailer, and they also were very low. I mean, the horse's head is right at the top. And so we're going to get this horse in there, and you've got the lead rope tied onto the horse. And I took the lead rope up, the long lead rope up through the trailer and out the front where you put the hay in, the feed. And I'm holding onto the lead rope here, and the horse is out just outside the trailer in the back. And I said, okay, well, we need to get this horse in the trailer, and I'm holding on the lead rope. And my father-in-law's back there, you know, yeah, where, he's smacking the horse on the rear end. This horse does not want to go in this trailer. But the horse is jumping around, gets partly into the trailer, and then decides he's had enough of this. So he starts backing up at about 100 miles an hour and over my father-in-law. And I'm holding on to this rope like I'm going to hold this horse, you know. That rope went through my hands like just, you know, so naturally ruined my hands. I mean, just tore the skin right off it. Because I'm going to get in a tug of war with a horse, right? So this thing's just zip. And then I decided this is not the way to do this. Well, I'll tell you how I got the horse in that trailer, which was much easier. I worked with the horse. But I'll save that for the discussion on instrumental learning. But I started using my noodle instead of my hands, you know, and it worked better that way. But so anyway, with the Horse Whisperer, to break a horse, what he says, and it's just straight, you know, psychology, Guthriean psychology. So what he says in the videotape is you get this horse, and on the videotape there's a horse in an arena with a lead rope on it. And there's a guy in the middle of the arena, and the horse is running around on the end of this like 20-foot rope. And then he says, so the horse is running. He says, now pull the horse in, shorten the rope a little bit, maybe a foot or two. And the horse is still running around, but he's never had a saddle on. And then you keep doing it. So you just gradually get closer and closer to the horse. Now, what you're doing is you're changing the stimulus situation, but you're doing it so gradually you don't get the old response that was connected to all those stimuli. So the horse is okay, and you keep gradually bringing him in. Finally, he's standing there in the arena with the horse here, and he's got the horse very close. And then he just touches the horse. The horse is but still he's okay. So then you get the blanket. Put a blanket on, then you put the saddle on. So he takes the blanket, and he just touches the face of the horse, but the blanket just touches him. And the horse is, but he's okay. So you do that for a while, and then you can see where this is going. And then eventually he gets the blanket and just sets it on the back of the horse. Horse is okay. After doing that a number of times, then he takes a saddle and just sets it lightly on the horse, and so on and so forth. So he keeps doing this, and the horse never does buck, or at least not very much. He gets the saddle on there, and then eventually just puts a little bit of weight in one of the stirrups, and then gets off, and just keeps doing that, and finally he gets on the horse, and then the horse is riding, and it's no problem. Now there's that method, and that's called the threshold method. But there's nothing new under the sun, although everybody that's into horse riding and all, this guy comes out with his tape, and everybody's like, oh, the horse whisperer. No, take an intro, take a theories of learning class, and 20 years ago, and you'd already figured that out. So that's the threshold method. And now there's the fatigue method. You know that by another name as well, probably. Similar to flooding or implosion therapy. The fatigue method is the old throw the horse on him, jump on him, let her rip, and that horse is going to buck and try and throw you off, and when he gets tired enough, he stops. Done. Now he's making a different response in the presence of those stimuli. What did he do last time there was a saddle on him now? The rider on, and he walked around calmly. So he has to get fatigued. Now he's fatigued, he's relaxed. That's the most recent response in the presence of a rider in a saddle. That's what he's going to do the next time. Anyway, it's a little bit more traumatic for the horse and the rider, but that's one way to get it done, I suppose. That's the old Texas way, break them, jump on their back. But this works with kids too. You got a kid who likes crayon, mark on the wall, get yourself a big old box of crayons, and make them fill up the entire wall. Oh, you like marking on the wall, you crayon? Yes. Oh, yeah, but I gotta wipe that off. Well, I like doing it. Okay, great. I know. Here's a whole box of Crayolas. You got to fill up the whole wall. Oh, that'll be fun. Yeah, except about 20 minutes later, it's not so much fun anymore. No, you got to keep going. No, I'm tired. No, you keep going. You can't move. Get away from that wall. You fill up the whole wall. Now they fill up the whole wall, and they're exhausted, right? The fatigue method. Now, what are they going to do the next time they're in the presence of a wall? They're not going to be marking on it, because that's what they did last time they were there. It was like back away from the wall. Maybe we should do this with some taggers. Catch the taggers and make them mark up with their spray paint, like, about a mile worth of wall. Just have, you keep going, man. Hey, just have them do it for like 8 hours or something. I guarantee you that'll break the habit. Why not? I think that'd be great. That'd be great therapy for taggers. Of course, that implies there's something wrong with them. If they're adolescents, I'd say they're okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. If they're 40 years old and they're doing this, then there's something wrong with them. I'm sorry. You know what the greatest deterrent to juvenile delinquent behavior is? Can you guess? What?
Ignorance.
No, age. Just growing up. No, that is the greatest deterrent to juvenile behavior, is that when they get older, they stop doing this kind of stuff. And then you get a new crop of teenagers coming down the pike to take their place. But if you got somebody who's 30 years old doing this stuff, there's something wrong. And, you know, their social development has been stunted. I mean, anyway. That's the fatigue method. And then finally, we have the incompatible response method, and that's just like counter conditioning that we had talked about. So you've seen all of these basic ideas in a different way. And so that incompatible response method is, you know, as I said, the child's there, he's afraid of thunder and lightning. Mother comes, brings his favorite bear, makes him feel calm. Now you've caused him to make a response different than being afraid. Little Peter was eating cookies that made him feel good in the presence of a fear-inducing stimulus, but the feeling good part replaced the fear. That's the incompatible response method. So force someone to make a response which is incompatible to the original one. Those are all his ideas about how you can change behavior, break habits, or change behavior. Sidetracking a habit, you can read up on that. It's just a simple idea. It just simply means that what he said is that if you avoid these situations where there are incorrect behaviors occurring, he said that is not really breaking habits. All you're doing is sidetracking it. If you get a relationship and it ends on a sour note, how many times have you heard somebody say, well, I have to leave, I'm moving away, I have to, it's the only solution. Well, it is a solution, you can move away, but if you ever come back, those feelings are going to be there again. So you're not actually changing the behavior, you're just sidestepping it by moving away. And so that doesn't really solve problems, it just sort of like puts them on, postpones them for a while. Interestingly enough, there was a one, I've got a videotape of the serial killer. He was raping and murdering some teenagers when he was in his, I want to say maybe his mid to late 20s. And so he gets caught for some other crime. He gets put in prison for about 20 years. Yeah, about 20 years. And he comes out, and guess what? He goes right back to the same old thing. He gets caught again. And what's interesting is in the videotape, some of the law enforcement people, when they're interviewing him, they said, you know, we pegged him as somebody who was in his late 20s, a white male in his late 20s committing these acts, but he turned out to be like in his late 40s. And they said, well, what happened there? And they said, well, they believed that what happened was when he did his prison sentence, all he was done is they put him on pause during that time period. It fits right in with Guthrie, like sidetracking a habit. You get these people that get put away for a long time, they come out. If that behavior wasn't changed or replaced, they're going right back to it. You know what the recidivism rate is over here in this prison? They told me last time I was out there, it was pushing 70%. Can you imagine that? 70% of these people end up right back there again. 70%. I mean, that's like just a revolving door. Because you think, well, they've done their time and they've learned some new behaviors and now they're good to go back in society. No. Now some are. You know, for some of them, it does. You know, that does work, and they're not going to. They'll go back to it. But that is such a high return rate that you know something isn't working. All right. They talk about maintaining stimuli there at the end. I already talked about that. Well, transfer of training, page 208. What do you think? Do you think that what you learn in one situation would easily transfer to some other new situation based on what we talked about here with Guthrie? Do you think there's a lot of transfer of training according to Guthrie? Learn something in one situation and you can expect it to pop up in a totally different situation? No. Because whatever you did most recently in that situation is what you're going to do. You got a new situation, different behaviors are going to happen over there. So behaviors that occurred in one situation are not going to easily transfer to others. So, now, can it happen? Yeah, it can happen by gradually changing over stimuli, like the threshold method. But you wouldn't expect a lot of transfer of training. Other things that just sort of, by the way, at the end there, Beck's formalization of Guthrie's theory, don't worry about that. I don't think it's really all that critical. The old doctrine of formal discipline. I think we covered that, didn't we, at one time? There's the doctrine of formal discipline. No, maybe we didn't. I'll tell you about it now. Why do you suppose that you are supposed to learn a modern language when you're in college? What's the point of that? You really think you're going to get fluent after 2 semesters? Well, then why do it at all? History. We do it because we've been doing it for a long time. It's based on this thing called the doctrine of formal discipline. Back when you had to learn Latin, particularly in Catholic schools, everybody had to learn Latin. And why learn Latin? Oh, well, that's the basis for the modern language. Yeah, okay, well, mostly it was because priests gave their sermons in Latin. And so if you wanted to understand a priest, you learned Latin. But that kind of got carried over to this idea of, well, if you take some subject that requires a lot of discipline, like learning a language, that somehow that would transfer over to other things like, well, then you'd be better at math. That's the doctrine of formal discipline. Learn some formal activity that requires a lot of discipline, and that will just naturally transfer to some other subject. And now we know, of course, that that's nonsense. It doesn't work. Learning a modern language has nothing to do with math. It is not going to help you with math. Learning math has nothing to do with learning a modern language. And you don't learn a modern language in 2 semesters anyhow, I've been here 30 years and I'm barely speak any Spanish. And I took some Spanish, but I don't use it every day. I don't have to use it. Necessity is the mother of invention. If I had to use it, I would learn it, but I don't have to, so. I could tell if somebody's swearing at me, and I could probably fumble my way through ordering soup at the local restaurant, but that's about it. If you don't really need to learn it, then generally you don't. I took a year of German in high school and a year of German in college. I probably know a dozen words, and I can say hello, how are you, what's your name in German. That's it. I think it's a waste of time. We keep doing things the same old dumb ways. By the way, if you're going to learn a modern language, do you think an adult is, as adulthood, that's the best time to learn it? Yeah. No. We know that a critical period for absorbing language is when you're a kid. You should be teaching modern languages to children. There are some schools down here, by the way, that teach, for example, Spanish to non-Spanish speaking people and in the grade school, and that is a good thing. There aren't very many of them, but there are some. And I think it ought to be a requirement, that you would learn that modern language when you're a kid, not when you're hitting it. When's the first time usually you get exposed to it? High school. Maybe your last year in high school. And then college. Your poor brain isn't ready for that. It's already, the critical period's over. Okay. Well, so what do you think about education? Rehearse the behaviors that you want to exhibit. And it's just as easy to learn incorrect responses as correct ones. And if you don't go back and change them, you're going to keep making the same old dumb mistakes. So it's not magical. There's nothing magical about it. And unless you go back and correct those behaviors, they're not going to change, magically somehow. And you can't just think things through. You've got to go through the motions, according to Guthrie. All right. Any questions about him? Let's start reviewing. Let's go back to, let's kind of go over chapters 1, 2, and 3 then we'll pick up Pavlov and then Guthrie and then I'll leave it to them. Now, do you want me to go